Hello everyone, this is Joe Cusick from the Cusick Group, securities offered by MoneyBlock and a proud contributor here at MarketStream.live with Strategy Now, taking a look at the midday. It has been an interesting day to say the least. We have a lot of headlines out, but the action has been mixed to moderately or modestly higher. Taking a look at some of the action right now, I'm actually seeing that the consensus right now is that we're going to be shifting. The S&Ps are in green territory, NASDAQ's in green territory, and we also have the NASDAQ a little bit challenged, but still green. So modestly higher, but the real story right now is what have been the catalysts. And earlier this morning, the markets right on the open really ran to the upside, and they pulled back. That was because of the fact that we had GDP numbers that came out. The real GDP increased, as we had discussed this morning on the open. Briefly, 2.9% for the third quarter. That's seasonally adjusted, and that was above consensus estimates of right around 2.5%. Now, this has marked an increase of from the previous quarter of 1.4%. And 0.7% or 0.8% in the previous quarter. This is solid, right? We want to see growth. We want to see that expanding. But while that expectation is now increasing, that we are moving forward, that we are growing, that was tempered. As a matter of fact, we could see that not only did short-term yields start to pull back off of its best levels after the GDP number pulled out. We also saw that the dollar index, while it showed some strength, was not able to get above that 99 level and is currently trading at 98.65 on the index, down about 0.23%. So it's interesting. Right now, we're seeing that the strategies and right now the market in general, there is still continued uncertainty. This pullback in the dollar index is something that I've been watching closely because it's really coming on the heels of what we've been seeing come out of Europe, which is there is definitely a sentiment from the central banking community that inflation is starting to rear its head, and the data out of Europe is showing that. You see the consumer prices in Spain and also Italy are on the move to the upside. The CPI out of Germany was a little bit lower, but again, you're seeing some mixed inflation data that's coming out in consumer pricing. That's going to put pressure on the greenback here in the United States, and it's going to add some volatility to the currency markets. A couple of the sectors that I want to keep an eye on going into the remainder of today and is going to be some areas that you can do some homework is the healthcare sector, down about 2.1%. And that's really on the heels and on the notes that came out from McKinsey, which is a big drug distributor. They came out and warned that the recent pricing trends that we're starting to see in the pharmaceutical and biotech sectors and companies have really lowered the profit contributions. And we actually saw that with some recent earnings announcements that came out, AbbVie being one that's most notable. It was down pretty significantly on the opening after they had announced. But if you take a look at the IBB, which is the ETF, the NASDAQ Biotech ETF, I'm taking a look at it right now. It's trading at $261.46, down $4, and it's been down as much as 1.5%, and that's extending its total October loss of about 9.7%. So again, seeing some of that pricing pressure that's been put on these drugs and biotech stocks is starting to hit the bottom line, and we're going to watch that offensive sector very closely and see if that pressure continues. In the industrial space, there's been some positive gains there. The space in general is up about 1.3%, and we're seeing that GE up about 77 cents today at 29.40. That's rallied about 3.2% after it announced that it's exploring. We have an official headline from GE that they're exploring opportunities with Baker Hughes, BHI. Baker Hughes is up about 5.9%. So again, we're going to watch that. As I had discussed earlier, this was earlier just some speculation. Now GE is coming out and saying that they're entertaining it. But just like any one of these folks, be very careful. There is a lot of speculation involved with this, but I want to make sure that I highlight it and also get that warning out for you. Also in the aerospace area, we've seen United Technologies up about $1.89 at 101.96. It's right now not been able to really extend that post-earnings pop that we saw. It did jump 3.1% so far this week, but it hasn't really gotten much more momentum since that initial pop. Want to keep an eye on that. The sector in general in aerospace has been up about 0.8%, so it's a solid gain. We've seen those gains also over in Europe in this aerospace sector, so we want to keep a close eye on that. Taking a look at technology, always a very influential offensive area that we want to keep an eye on. Also something that you always want to look at that sliver in your portfolio. The group in general is up about 1%. They have some relative strength. We saw that Google came out. Their earnings were really solid last night. Stocks trading at 803.05, up about 770. That's about a 1% rally after the announcement last night. Great bottom line estimates. Numbers were solid. Traders and investors are liking what they heard. They beat both top and bottom line estimates. Facebook to the upside as well. Facebook up about 222, 131.91 is the current price, gaining about 1.7%. And again, I think it's getting some of that catalyst from the Google earnings. Semiconductors, though, got to keep an eye on that. Want to see if that momentum in the semis, especially after some interesting mergers and acquisitions that have been happening in that space. The general sector is up about 0.8%, and that's extending its weekly total gain of 1.9%. We also want to take a look at the Treasury markets. Like I said, the Treasury markets right now are where individuals that are trying to see what the tells are in this market, the Treasury markets are what's really giving you some tells. Once the GDP number came out, the first thing that we saw in the Treasury markets were that yields started to really move. They've settled down. The 2-year note is down 2 basis points, around 0.86%, and the 10-year note is at 185. You still see that yield curve steepening between the 2-year and the 10-year, but the real story here is that initially the Fed funds, the 30-day Fed funds rate, which is what's used to price out the probability of a rate hike in December, it initially popped on the GDP number as well as some inflation data that was coming out of Europe to about 82.5%. It's pulled back a little bit, but still in that 80% level. So there looks like there's a high probability of a rate increase in December. Finally, taking a look at, and I said I was going to discuss the Michigan sentiment number. That came out after our opening bell discussion and what's hot on the open. The Michigan sentiment number came in actually at a disappointing level around 87.9. We've seen successive numbers come in well below where we saw its highest reading, which was in September at 91.2. So we're seeing that consumer sentiment is actually pulling back, again, just adding to the volatility that we're seeing in the market. And as a matter of fact, looking at the VIX trading over 15. And if you actually look at the VIX futures, you're starting to see that the November and the December VIX futures are now trading in the 16 to 18 range. So we see volatility being priced into the next future 2 months. So we're going to watch that very closely, especially as we continue to see the headlines. Be careful, folks. Before I did come on air, I did see a headline that the FBI is possibly looking at some of the emails that are now surfacing from Hillary Clinton. Again, I would be very cautious about the initial reactions in the market and so forth. And so, again, don't do anything haphazardly. stick to your plan, stick to your logic chain, and stick with MarketStream.live. All right, we'll see you at Tech Talk at 3:30 Eastern, and then we'll wrap up this week at 4:30 with our closing bell. This is Joe Cusick from the Cusick Group, securities offered by MoneyBlock. Wishing you a great rest of the trading day. We'll see you at Tech Talk at 3:30. Take care, everybody.